Everybody has a story, but not all stories have been told. This is Benson the Storyteller, and these are some of my untold stories. Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Benson the Storyteller, and these are some of my untold stories. For those of you who are new to my channel is about personal stories and experiences that I've gone through in my life. For those of you who have already subscribed and are repeat viewers, welcome back to my channel. Now, I'm up somewhere next to there's a cinema just here, so I came to do something over here, but I said let me make for you guys a video. On my previous video I was telling you guys about how my dad got an opportunity to leave Kenya with his family and work in the Foreign Office, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Australia. So I was telling you guys about how we traveled and left Kenya to go to Australia. That was in my previous video, and in this video I'm going to go on from where I left it. So I was, by the time we were going to Australia, I think I was 5 years old. Yeah, because I hadn't yet started first grade. I hadn't started my formal primary education, because I left when I was in kindergarten. So by the time I was going to Australia, I was 5 years old. So what I remember is that I didn't know it was a plane. I didn't know what a plane was, but I remember we entered this tube thing. We sat there. After a while, we came out because there's no direct flight from Kenya to Australia. So we went via, I think it was Zimbabwe at that time. So we took another plane from Zimbabwe to Australia. I can't remember which town we landed in, whether it's the capital or Sydney or Melbourne, but we moved from Zimbabwe to Australia. Now, when I was back in Kenya, I'd never really seen a white person. You remember, I grew up, I was born and mostly raised with my grandmother in the village, and when I left the village I went to Kondele to stay with my auntie, and even there I never used to go because Kondele is a little distance from Kisumu town itself. So I hadn't really been exposed to white people. So I remember when I was in Nairobi, and then we took the plane to to Zimbabwe, and then from Zimbabwe to Australia, I was seeing there was a lot of, white people around. You see, I'm just seeing white people more often, because back at home, in the village, I'd totally never seen a white person. But then when I got to Kondele and stayed with my auntie, there was this boy who was an albino. The albinos are these people with, they don't have the black melanin pigmentation in their skin. So they have this pale looking skin, whitish, and then their hair and also their eyes don't have the pigment. So there's one kid in the kindergarten who was an albino, and he was called Peter. So the only closest thing to a white person that I'd seen was Peter. All right? And I remember the teacher used to try to explain, people used to pick on him, like, look at him, how he looks like, look at his skin and all that. And the teacher used to try to explain. But the way she explained it, she said that he was sick. All right? She said that he was sick, and that's why he looked like that. So when I was coming across all these white people, I was like, I always had that picture that everyone who looks different from me is an albino. There's nothing like being white, or I just knew they were albinos. And an albino is someone who's sick. That's what I always thought. So when we got to Australia, imagine coming from a backdrop where everyone around you is black, and you can hardly see any white people. The only person you see is an albino, Peter. So when I got to Australia, all of a sudden I was in the middle of albinos. Like everyone around me was albino. All of them were white. Moving from a place where everybody is black, and then just one Peter albino, to a place where now everybody's albino and you're the odd one out. So naturally, I was confused and I was staring. I was like, could all these people be sick? Because I was told Peter is sick and that's why he's white, that's why he's albino. So I kept like staring. And me, when I was young, I told you guys that I was very shy. I never used to speak out. I never used to speak my mind. I never used to ask, but I used to take in a lot. I used to observe, watch, and take in so much. So it got to a point, my mom noticed. I was staring. I kept staring at people. She's holding my hand. We're walking, and I'm looking back. I'm looking at, And then she was like, "What is it?" Then I asked, "Why are all these people? Why are there so many of these albinos here? Why is everyone sick here?" Then she was like, "No, who told you they're sick?" I told her there's a boy in our kindergarten in Kondele called Peter, and Peter looks like these guys. And we were told by the teacher that Peter is sick, he's an albino. My mom said, no. Yes, there are people who are albinos, but there are also people who are just white and they're not albinos. And in this place that we've come now, you're going to see so many of them. Then I was like, oh, so they're not sick? No, she told me like, they are just like you, These people, they're just like you, they're just normal human beings. It's just that the color of their skin, their hair, everything's different, So I got to start realizing and noticing that the world is big and there are so many things that were catching my eye. Because consider again, I was raised in the village and I was hardly exposed to town. So here again, I come to a place where there are so many big buildings. There are cars, there are buses. There are like these buses that are joined together, like two buses joined together, almost like a train, but they are buses. I'd never seen anything like that before, And so from there, I remember when we arrived, the High Commission already had a house for us. That was the first house we moved into. All right. So it was, I can't remember the name of the street or the area, but I know that it was next to this big park. It was like up on a hill, and then it had a road that went down and to a cross section, and then the opposite side of the road, there was a very large park, a very nice and beautiful park. So when we got there, we moved in. The first thing I noticed, as usual, just like the same thing I noticed when I came here to the UK, is the weather. The weather was just different. The weather was different. And when we were staying there, we had neighbors, but I think we were like the only black people in that street. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I remember the place. I just can't remember the name of the town. And at the back of the house, there was this tree with a fruit. Up to now, I really don't know what it was. It was a fruit that looks like, the tree had fruits that looked more like pears, but then the skin was like hairy, green, and it was kind of hairy. Almost like, what do you call them? Almost like a kiwi. There's a fruit called a kiwi, but it's not a kiwi, right? I don't know what fruit that was. I remember even my parents were wondering what type of, and the neighbor told us, oh, it's edible. So it tastes kind of like sour, but kind of like the texture is like a pear, but it's kind of like sour. It's got this strange taste anyway. Yeah. So we stayed there for a while. I remember at this time, that's the time I got my first bicycle. My dad bought me a bicycle. My elder sister had a bike, and my younger sister had a bike. We were 3 kids by that time. My younger brother hadn't been born yet, but my last born bro. Would later on, he was going to be born in Australia, but by the time we moved, we were only 3. So I remember we were bought a bicycle. Mine was blue. Yeah, I remember. And my sister taught both of me and my younger sister how to ride the bike. We used to go down to that park I'm telling you about. It was a really large park, and I'm telling you, I put all my effort in learning how to ride a bicycle. By that time, I was 5, I hadn't yet started school. I think I started school like a year or so, or some months after we'd arrived. So I was just, getting used to the country and the people. The Australian people are really, really nice. They are really nice. They almost have the same kind of sense of humor, like the British. The British are really funny, generally, just averagely in every conversation. I think they're just born like that. They're just funny people. Just like the Australians. They joke a lot. And I tend to think that back in Africa, we're just too serious. We're always serious. I mean, I don't know if it's because of poverty. I don't know what the issue is. But I tend to feel that Africans are kind of more, they take life too seriously, In this country, in the UK, just like in Australia, people are always joking. People are generally just funny people, And yeah, that's one of the things that I've noticed. One of the differences between, I'd say the similarities between the UK and Australia. And also the accent. Australians have this kind of different accent, Like they say, "Good day, mate." Yeah. And here, it's more like, "You okay?" Like, just a little variations in the way they greet. But generally, the people are all friendly and all chatty and jokey. Australians are a little more chatty because here people are more like reserved. People are a little more reserved, but very, very polite. So we stayed in that particular place for a while, and later on we moved to a different place. So actually we lived in 2 different places when we were staying in Australia. We lived in the first place where we moved into, that was like on a hill, and down there was a big park. And then we moved to the house that now we are going to stay for longer, because this first house we didn't stay there for long. It was almost like a transitioning place from there, moving to the place now we are going to stay. So we moved to the second house we moved to was in a street called Beasley Street. It was house number 202. I can't forget. 202 Beasley Street in Farah. And we were living in Canberra. Some people don't know actually that Canberra is the capital of Australia. Yeah? People tend to think it's either Sydney or Melbourne, which is not the case. It's Canberra. Canberra is the capital city. It's where most of the ambassadors, the high commissioners and all that, that's where they stay. It's the equivalent of Washington, D.C., the capital. Yeah, it's the capital, and it's at the same time, it's administrative capital. But I think the financial capital is either Melbourne or Sydney. I'm not really sure. So we moved from our first place, we moved to 202 Beasley Street. Now, there, when we moved there, that's where now, by that time, I think I'd started to make friends more in Beasley Street. And at that time, my mom also, she'd started, there's some training that she used to go to. She was a teacher already, but when we came, she didn't start teaching in Australia. I think maybe it's because the curriculums were different, or I don't know. But she was doing something else. And she did her driving pretty fast. And I remember my mom had it was a yellow Volkswagen. These short cars. It wasn't like the Volkswagen, the ones we know in Africa, like the Beetle. No. It was just Volkswagen, but it was a short car. It was yellow. And most of the time, I remember she was taught how to drive, and then most of the time we'd be with her. She'd be, driving us to. When I started school, actually, she was driving. She used to drive us to school in the morning, and in the evening. And actually, the thing I liked about that street, Beasley Street, or generally Australia, was that they even had the milkman. Like in the morning, there's this minibus that comes, and then they have like bottles of milk in the back. So a guy, it comes driving down the street, and then a guy jumps out with like bottles of milk, leaves it on your door, rings the bell, and runs off. The next morning, you leave the bottles outside the door. He comes with the new bottles of milk, picks the old one, and goes back to the car. The car's just moving slowly, and they're jumping in and out, leaving milk on the doors. I think that was really cool. It was really nice and interesting. So, 202 Beasley Street, on the opposite side of the road, because our house was just next to the road. So there was a road in front of our house. It had we had like a small front yard, and then there was a road, and then on the opposite side of the road, there was also another park. I don't think it was really a park. It was just a place that was being prepared for some residential houses. Yeah. There's a time I checked Google Maps, and I saw that now it's all that place, they're just houses, like residential houses. But I remember that time it was just a big park. We used to cross the road, but my dad was so strict and my mom about crossing that road. Anytime they'd see me crossing that road or on the other side, I'm telling you, I'd be in trouble. African parents are very different from these European parents. European parents, you misbehave, nothing happens to you. Like, they just warn you or tell you, go stand at the corner, some crazy stuff that don't even apply and work on African kids. African kids have to be smacked a bit. That's just the way we grew up. So, anytime they'd find me on the other side, in that park place, I'd be in trouble. But the odd thing is, that park place is where most of the cool kids went to, kids with bikes, kids with, there were even some kids with these small racing bikes, yeah? All the cool kids used to be on the other side of the road. And I always wanted to go and play on the other side of the road, but my parents, because the road that was in front of our house, it was kind of a busy road. And there wasn't really a zebra crossing on that road. And so my parents were always worried. And the thing also was that every time I wanted to cross the road, I have a younger sister. She always wanted to go with me, and it just made it even, yeah, because my elder sister was in, she was in a boarding high school, because with her, she was already, I think she was finishing a primary, yeah, but she was in a boarding school. And so most of the time, it was just me and my younger sister. Yeah. So I actually have a lot of fond memories about about traveling and moving, relocating as a whole family to Australia. And I got to make a lot of friends. And I got to realize that just the same way that when I went to Australia, just the same way I couldn't understand how and why all this bunch of albinos were all in one place. It's just the same way some Australians, some Aussies, Australians are called Aussies. The Aussies, some of them also had never been exposed to had never been exposed to black people, really, I think Canberra, they are more exposed because they are more like international people who come there because it's the capital, it's the administrative capital, and so there are more ambassadors, high commissioners, and their families and children there. But still, I remember the kids I used to play with were always curious. The same way I was curious when I came is the same way they were curious when they saw me. They used to like pointing, and they're wondering how comes I'm dark. I remember there's one who used to ask me, he used to call me the burnt boy. He used to think that my skin is burnt, and his mom used to say, don't say that, that's mean, and he just couldn't it wasn't racism, he was just genuinely confused. He just genuinely couldn't understand what was going on. And also, I think they're more used to seeing the Aborigines. You see, they're indigenous people, ethnic group, indigenous people called the Aborigines. They are the first people who inhabited Australia. Yeah, before the first people from Britain went to Australia and ended up, colonizing and taking over the whole country. Just the same way there were Indians in America, and then the same British moved in colonies and ended up taking up the whole of America. And somehow the Indian population reduced. That's just the same thing that happened in Australia, because in Australia, the original inhabitants were Aborigines, but I didn't really get to see so many of them. And Aborigines are kind of African and not African. I'd say they're more like people from where? Madagascar. They've got kind of African skin, but they've got the hair like Asians. They've got like Asian hair, but they're African skin. So you can just picture how they look like. So the Australians are used to seeing the Aborigines, but then comes someone like me. My hair is just kinky. It's not Asian, the smooth flowing hair. No. Ours is curly, And then our skin shade isn't very, very different, unless you are an African from maybe a country like Southern Sudan. Southern Sudan guys have this really dark shade. They've got heavy melanin, right? And maybe that would be the difference. But generally, Africans are lighter than me, or just my complexion. And the Aborigines are more or less the same. Maybe a little lighter than me, but the same. But the only difference is the hair. So I remember that kind of got them off, And then at the same time, I realized that most people in Australia don't know much about Africa, right? They think we are all like one big country, and the ones who know that we are not one big country only know about South Africa and maybe Nigeria. So when you go there, that's the first thing they think. They'll ask, "Oh, are you South African?" "No." "Are you Nigerian?" "No." "Where are you from?" "Kenya," So they're like, oh. And then the thing they know about Kenya mostly is our sportsmen, that we are good runners, and that we have the Maasai. But the ones who know about the running and the Maasai are people who actually know about Africa, you know, people who took their time to research. But the average Joe, the average person, by that time, they didn't know about these smaller countries, the Ugandas, the Tanzanias, the Mozambiques, no. The Sierra Leone, no. They just know mostly about South Africa and Nigeria, which is understandable because those are, like, I think the most populous and one of the very big developed African countries. So yeah, so that's what happened when we moved. And yeah, the first year was just adapting and fitting in. I hadn't yet started school, which in itself is a different story, and the drama there. But that's how we moved from Kenya, coming to Australia. We got in our first house, and then after a short while moved to now the house that we are going to stay in most of our stay in Australia, right? Yeah. So guys, that's how we moved, and that's how we started staying in Australia. I'm going to move on with my story in my next video, and I'm going to tell you guys about how I started school and how that went. Yeah. So if you're new and you're watching me for the first time, please subscribe to my channel, like my videos. You can pop in a message there, and I hope you keep watching, and tell a friend to tell a friend. So I'll see you guys on my next video.